Raidieraksts Drošinātājs. Hello, Denis.
Hello.
War dramatically changes people's lives. Who are those people who decide to leave their previous professions, to take on risks, and become deminers in Ukraine right now?
So, talking my experience working in the demining sector over the last 8 years, I could tell, I know different stories from, 3 countries which I've been working. In majority situation, people who at some point decide to join humanitarian demining sector, they could quite different background. If you're talking particularly in Ukraine, whereas more than 50% of our staff have a university degree, we have a different stories from a different part of the countries, people who decide to be helpful for Ukraine and they change their life and life of the Ukraine. We had a quite interesting stories from people who was used to be working in the past in being engineering, some of them even working as doctors, because there is definitely the crisis in Ukraine, crisis in the labor law sector. People are willing to take different opportunities, and some of them who join particular our organization, it's changing their lifestyle, and majority of them are really proud that they are doing demining and they're helping on a daily basis to Ukraine country, to Ukraine society, making the Ukraine mines-free.
Well, but demining is not really, let's say, a regular job, if we can describe it like that. There probably needs to be some more reasons besides only getting a job and getting paid.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm agree with you that, from one hand, it's demining, it's quite unique job, and it's for some people it sounds slightly scary or terrifying them. However, based on the requirements to become a deminer, we don't have a strong quite high standard or benchmark to become a deminer. This person shouldn't have any health disabilities, be willing to work and willing to learn, and within 1 month we're able to train the person who used to in the past doing very different kind of labor job or whatever, and to able to become a deminer. Of course, there is multiple different courses where people are improving their competencies, their skills, but to become a kind of basic level entrance to our organization, which is deminer, it takes people 1 month to pass the demining course, successfully pass a test in the end, and they able to become a deminer. In terms of, I agree that this is quite unique. However, it's not very dangerous. If people are following the instructions, if they are following the standard operation procedures, this work will be not dangerous and become to be a plumber, for example.
In almost all of the jobs, there is this trial period. What is your experience? How many people, after working some time, say, no, this is not for me? I thought it's going to be different.
Well, in our sector, I would say it's a bit unique, because we, on a monthly basis, we're training, a lot of people. I would say that majority of them realizing, because, what does our training looks like? You go into the training field, which is kind of dummy field, which doesn't have any kind of danger, hazardous items. And they are doing the same drills. We are teaching them how to clear the land. It's quite difficult, quite exhausting, and it's required a lot of concentration, physical fit. And majority of the people who understand that this is part of dream job for them, they're realizing this in I would say, first couple days up to the week, and they're realizing how difficult it could be. They're making decision quite often in the beginning of the training, rather than a couple months afterwards when they start the job with a Halo. So this is based on my observation and experience.
You represent a internationally well-known NGO, Halo Trust. It's Ukrainian subsidiary. Could you just tell our listeners what is Halo Trust and what is its experience in demining operations worldwide?
Halo is the biggest and the oldest humanitarian mine action organization. Halo started in Afghanistan in 1988 As of today, Hello is working over the 30 countries, and overall the number of the staff is about 12,000 of the people working across the globe. All these countries, some is affected by the various conflict containing the mines, the remnants of war, hazards. So Ukraine is one of them. Talking particular of Ukraine program, Hello start working in Ukraine. So registered in 2015 and become operational, start deploying the first teams in the beginning of 2016. I'm joining the Hello in Ukraine in the same time in March 2016. So since that time, Hello was working in the east. We was working in Luhansk, in a Donetsk area, where we cleared significant territories back in the time. However, since Russian invasion in 2022, our program with our staff, we have to move to the areas which is under government control and become operational, first of all, in the north, around the capital, around the Kyiv. And now, as of today, Hello Ukraine has 1,200 employees, and we are conducting the humanitarian mine clearance around the 7 oblasts in Ukraine. So we are working in the central region, we're working in the east, and we're working in the south. So from this 1,200, we have 1,000 people who we call operational staff. These are people who are doing on a daily basis, conducting the demining, removing, identifying, and other teams are destroying the mines and the hazardous items. We have teams who are responsible for identification of the hazardous areas. We have teams who are liaising with the communities and changing their behavior, reducing the risk of the mine accidents. So Hello is conducting the quite numerous activity, which is everything is linked with the humanitarian mine action.
Let's imagine that war stopped today. You said at the moment you have 1,200 employees, but 1,000 of them are those who are working in the field. How many employees would you need to do your job as much as you would be happy with at this moment, knowing how many mines there are in Ukraine at the moment? How many people would that be?
So it's a difficult question, because it's quite often we get in the similar question in terms of how many resources, financial, how much time you need to clear Ukraine, how many human resources. For now, I don't have a good answer because, first of all, there is a significant territories which are not under control of Ukraine, and we know the fact that this territories is also contaminated. In order to answer your question, you need to answer all three in terms of financial requirements, in terms of duration, how long it takes, and in terms of number of the staff. But before answering these questions, we need first of all to make the assessment of all area and identify all hazardous areas which is required the clearance, and to do the same from other side, which is currently inaccessible, which is under occupation. Only after this we able to tell, make a rough calculation and prediction how much it takes of time, resources, funding, etc. But it's definitely the whole sector which is in Ukraine. We had a number of international and national organizations who are working and conducting the clearance. We have national stakeholders like special emergency services, special transport services, who are also conducting the clearance. I'm going to tell that the current resources is not enough to deal with the scale of the program, and it's going to take decades to clear Ukraine and make it mine-free. Previously, Hello been working in the east. There, the level of contamination was quite, I would say, not very high compared to the other contaminated countries. But nowadays, we had a similar situation like in Sri Lanka, Cambodia, where you don't have one single items, but you facing on the fields with a mine pattern. What does it mean? It's mines which is laid in one lane, and it could be different types of the mines. It could be anti-personnel, nearby they could be anti-vehicle mines. And all this is also contains some unexploded ordnance, like different mortars, projectiles, which is, because it will, all these minefields are quite close or used to be close to the former front line, whereas exchange of fire was, like along the 6-7 months in some areas. It's over the 2 years. So the density of contamination is in some areas is quite insane. So as of today, just working on these new areas which has been allocated to us after the invasion, Halo already identified over 25,000 hazardous areas, and some of them been removed, destroyed by our resources. Some of them been handed over for future disposal by the third parties. So it's a quite big amount of hazardous items. However, there is more to identify, more to clear, and more to destroy. So it's quite big number, and unfortunately, which each day as the conflict is going on, the number of the hazardous items which we have to clear, it's just keep increasing.
Do I understand correctly that you even have a formula that each day of war prolongs the work of deminers for so much time?
There is, kind of unofficial, saying, but it's quite speculative, and we can't refer to it, and making any forecasts. But it's definitely, every day, of the war, it's definitely adding on the top of the existing contamination, adding the another layer, and it's making, the work of deminers in the future or even now not easier, just to make it even worse and making Ukrainian land more contaminated.
But I can ask Halo Trust as an organization that works in all of these problem areas around the world, you as a representative of Halo Trust, can you confirm that Ukraine is the area with the biggest mine problem in the world?
Probably, I'm going to refer to my previous answer because we can't make these strong statements. I would say that it's correct to say that Ukraine is one of the most contaminated. But for example, Halo is working on Afghanistan over than 30 years, and we keep working, because Afghanistan has numerous of, numbers of the wars and the conflicts, and the level of contamination they are quite high. There is some of the countries which is Halo completely clear and declare them mine-free. However, in Ukraine, first of all, to make this strong statement that Ukraine is the most contaminated country in the world, we need to have access to all the areas and finish the assessment or survey of these areas. Only after this, we able to make a judgment call in terms of. But overall, I would say Ukraine is definitely in, top 5 contaminated countries in the world.
It's really painstakingly slow job. Is there some new technologies that can help to do this work quicker? And what do you say to those who say just blow up and all the mines will blow up with your controlled explosion? Or is it like 30 years ago when it's just the work of one person, one mine, and very slow and very, very cautious job?
I partially agree that manual demining is a quite slow process. However, it definitely was, slowly improved, our procedures since, the humanitarian mine action start being a thing. So over the last 30 years, the procedure definitely was improving. And we, as a Halo Ukraine, we are forward leaning towards the technology. So as of today, we moving the center of the gravity from the manual clearance to the mechanical clearance. So as of today,
What does it mean?
So we are using the different mechanical assets, which is helping our deminers to make it more quicker, more efficient. So we're using different remote vegetation cutting machine. It's like a big lawnmower, 1,000 kilograms, which is able to remove vegetation, able to remove some surface laid mines, and able to make a work of deminer, I would say 5-10 times quicker, depends on the threat. Additionally to that, we are using the heavy machinery plants like excavators, different demining machine, which is able to help us with some, depends on the condition, depends on the threat, but it definitely able to accelerate the work of the manual clearance. And then last but not least, we also utilizing nowadays drone technology. So all our teams who is doing the survey, they are using the drones in order to make the work and identification of the mines more efficient. And after we identify the hazardous areas, we also using the more sophisticated drones with the high resolution cameras. And we're using we call it this opportunity window from the end of the autumn until the beginning of the spring, before everything become green. We are deploying the drones to the identify hazardous areas and identifying all the surface items. So it could be mine, it could be projectile, everything. And we, by the end of it, we had a good high resolution satellite image with the help of our specialists, mark every items which was identified on the surface or maybe partially buried, which is make the work of our deminers more efficient, more safe, and more quicker.
Probably there are listeners right now who are wondering, why do you actually need civilians as deminers? Because perception is that mining and demining is something that military does.
I would disagree with the statement because first of all, the army capacity and army nowadays is quite overstretched, and they doing all the best in order to protect the country. So there is definitely never enough of the human resources. That's why it's quite essential that civilian is involved in this and dealing with the problem. And I would be not comparing this to activities, a kind of military demining, which is predominantly designed to, kind of operational purposes, and the humanitarian demining, which is predominantly focusing on civilians, help on communities, help on all the kind of, some district region, to be making sure that there is, there is no threat to this particular community.
How do you decide where to go and work to demine?
So we're working on, first of all, there is a National Mine Action Authority in Ukraine, and there is a National Mine Action Center who are coordinating the numbers of the humanitarian operators in a country. They are allocating, first of all, the areas of operation for each operator. So within these allocated areas to us, we had a prioritization matrix, which is based on a priority of the local administration, based on a priority of oblast administration. Additionally, it's based on our own humanitarian kind of criteria, like proximity to the settlement of these particular contaminated areas, the facts of whether it's, blocking the access to the critical infrastructure, whether it had in the past accident or incidents, etc. So all this criteria is combined into the matrix, which is giving us a good sense what is the high priority, low priority, or mid priority fields. And we just, picking up which clearance of which areas will have the biggest impact on a community.
But how do you gather the information? Do people already know in Ukraine that if you have a mine problem, called the Halo Trust or called the army, or municipalities are those who are asking for your help in demining operations?
I would say both. It's working on a both way. First of all, we had the teams which is called non-technical survey, which their job within our area operation to visit every settlement and visit every area which is belong to the settlement, and they're responsible to speak with the people, local authority, army, just ordinary people who live in this area and who was witnesses in the past of mine laying or fighting, and they are collecting all this data and putting on a map and identifying the areas required for the clearance. However, it's working from also from other end. The people applying, kind of giving a heads up to the local administration who is creating the prioritization plan and give us a list to such operators like as we are, where we should focus our efforts. So it's kind of combination of the both, and making sure that we are not missing anything in this.
And when your D-miners go to the field, go to a new place, what is the reaction they mostly get? Happiness, the specialists have arrived. Some might be angry that they had to wait for so long. Maybe there are farmers who are angry because you don't let him to work on his field before you D-mine. What reactions do you get when your D-miners get to the place where they have to work?
Overall, I would say people are treating our D-miners teams quite positive. Everyone understands that we are doing this for Ukraine, for their community. We're doing this for free. Of course, there is pressure on the farmers, pressure because they're renting the land, they have to pay their employees, and they would like always to be able as quick as possible to be able to start plowing and utilizing the land and collecting the harvest. And they have a lot of economical pressure on them. So it's quite a common situation in the sector that the agricultural sector would like to make demining and clearance as quick as possible, and trying to having the pressure of overall sector. But overall, the ordinary civilians, they're quite, I would say in general, they are very friendly, and they are really glad help such an organization like what we are doing.
I was surprised to find out in one article I read before this interview, in which you described a strange problem that when your operational staff get to the location, there are quite often problems with finding a living space for them because they cannot travel from Kiev every day. Could you talk about that you have to bring them from further away to the areas you are demining?
Yeah, you're quite right. This is one of our challenges, and which we are working on, reducing all the commit time from the place of where our deminers are staying. It could be temporary accommodation, or sometimes they could be spending, they could be people from the Kharkiv working in areas from the Kharkiv. But it's in our interest as an employee is to reduce the timing our teams are spending from point A to point B, where they're gonna doing the work. Quite often in the east and in the south, or where we're working, the infrastructure is heavily damaged. So you could be looking for accommodation for our teams in the village, and some of the village has no building which is not impacted by the conflict, or in some villages, particularly in the south, it might be no local residents at all, because all the buildings are destroyed. There is no appropriate accommodation. In order to mitigate this, we are looking for doing some remote camps for our teams, that they could be living as close to their kind of task where they're working as close as possible. It will minimize the travel time and economical impact, logistical impact, etc.
And I understand that the problem also is that from the villages that you are demining, and then where you cannot find a undamaged house, the people probably moved to the next village where you would try to find accommodation, but there are already displaced people there, so you have to go even further away, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's quite a common situation. Because there is a lot of artificially displaced people in the areas where we're working. People who are moved from occupied territories, who have to relocate from the territories, which is in the proximity to the front line, where is constant shelling is going on. And yeah, it's quite often that's existing accommodation that's quite overstretched because of numbers of IDPs and numbers of the damaged buildings, which is making situation in some of the areas of Ukraine quite difficult to find the accommodation. And I'm not talking about any luxury accommodation. I'm talking about the kind of basic accommodation facilities.
That's a challenge for the managers at Halo Trust. But if we talk about the deminers and their work, what is the biggest challenge for them? I understand that the military is time to time being quite smart in placing like bombs under bombs, putting trigger wires and stuff like that. What is the biggest challenge that you remind your deminers again and again that they have to be wary about?
So I would slightly redirect my answer towards different topic, because I would say that our deminers, they are not dealing with improvised devices which you described. The main goal of our deminers is identify the hazardous items and to stop his work, raise a hand and ask for the call for the help of the more experienced team leader who is making a judgment call with, what our deminers are doing. They are preparing the, kind of area in order to be able to use a detector, identifying the metal signals, follow up with metal signals. As soon as they identify the hazardous items, which could be anything, they just asking for the help for more competent staff who will decide whether we're able to deal with this or whether we're not, whether we're able to destroy this item or whether we need to hand it over to the special authorities who is dealing with improvised item.
Right.
But coming back to the question, what is the main challenges of our deminers? I would say the condition of work. It's quite difficult because our deminers are working almost 10 months per year. So we're working from the March till the end of December, having about 2 months on the stand down. But it's quite difficult because we're starting working in the March and the beginning of the year where it's still cold. It could be partial snow, could be cold wind, and the weather could be quite miserable. During the summer, Ukraine climate is quite extreme, and our deminers are working on a quite high temperature, which is quite difficult. And then by the end of the year, close to the Christmas break, it's getting quite difficult. And all this time, our people are working outdoor. This is, I would say, the biggest challenges for everyone.
You are Ukrainian, right? By nationality.
Correct.
You have some foreigners working at Halo Trust Ukraine?
Correct. Yeah, we have a lot of my colleagues. They have, they have international staff, and they are working in Halo Ukraine from different countries.
Do you and your foreign colleagues look at the mine issue in Ukraine a bit differently? I'm asking this because, let's say, Princess Diana, who is very well known and associated with Halo Trust, had campaigned for ban of landmines. But as we see in case of Ukraine, landmines are sometimes helping to save Ukraine, just as a protection from the attacks of invaders. Is there an issue that you look a little bit different at the mines as a Ukrainian than your foreign colleagues at Halo?
I would say, my answer will be quite simple. Mine is mine. We don't care, how it's ended up or who laid the mine. What we care about whether this mine is impacting the life of civilian, and we are working in areas which is being allocated to us by the National Management Center, which is sitting under Ministry of Defense, and they kind of give us areas which is currently not having the strategical impact of the protection of the country, and we treating each mine as just a risk for the life of civilians.
I'm asking this because I think few months ago in Latvia there was quite a big discussion after the Latvian military said that quite many people were surprised that it is military that is saying that, and they couldn't understand why shouldn't we put mines right on the border with enemy and possible invader.
As of today, we are not working on any kind of side of the border or closer to the border 20 kilometers or closer to the line of contact to 20 kilometers. So we're not making any impact on this kind of mine laying, protecting mine laying for protecting the government. But where we focusing is on the legacy of the war, where the mines or ERW are not changing any situation. However, it's definitely making the threat on a human's life.
But what is your stance? If you want, you can not answer this question, but if Ukrainian military says, well, we need to mine the field just to protect ourselves from the attack of Russian tanks, and then on the other side, you know, as a professional in demining, that it's going to be a problem for decades, what do you say? What should military do? Should they use the mines or shouldn't they use the mines and try to use other means?
Well, it's a difficult question for a person who's working in the humanitarian sector, and you're asking quite tricky one. In short, I completely disintegrate in these two things. The army has their own needs, and I'm not in position to make any comments or criticize an army. And we have different targets, different goals, etc. There is definitely the space where we're able to work, collaborate with each other in order to help Ukraine to protect their citizens and help Ukraine to be able to protect existence of Ukraine and from invasion.
What has been the result of your work so far?
So our survey teams identified over than 21 million square meters of the areas which need to be cleared. It has a different type of the threat. It could be mines, unexploded ordnance of the war. As of today, we cleared a bit more than 4 million square meters. So it's giving you kind of a ratio between how quick a survey and how slightly slower the clearance. And as I mentioned previously, we already identify and dispose or hand over to further disposal more than 25,000 of the hazardous items. So as of today, we conduct a lot of sessions, about 20,000 sessions for the local residents, and in order to change their behavior and give them the recommendation what's the action required in the identify any hazardous item. And there is definitely way more work remaining. As of today, we are working on a clearance, 139 teams we are deploying. That's why, the scale of the problem of Ukraine is quite huge, and we definitely need the extra resources in order to overcome and solve them.
And I understand that you are financed by different governments. If I go to your webpage, I saw a Latvian flag as well, that some part of the money is coming from the Latvian taxpayers. What's about the funding of your organization? Is there everything in place, what you need? Or you're actively looking for support more?
It's not a part of my remit, particularly the financial. I'm more focusing on the technical one. But overall, I could tell that we are funding on different institutional donors as well as a philanthropy. But it's quite important for the funding of any kind of countries which is involved on the conflict, that the level of funding remain stable. Because this is a problem which can't be solved with one money transaction. It's essential that that's number of the staff we employed and on a daily basis during the clearance in Ukraine. It's quite essential that the funding level remain stable over the years.
At the moment, you are head of operations department of the Halo Trust in Ukraine, but you started not as a big boss, but at a lower level. Could you just summarize your experience at Halo and what it has taught you about the world and Ukraine and the mines?
It's true. I'm started from a basic level and joined non-technical survey team back in 2016 in the east, not far away from a Halo operational office, which is used to be in Kramatorsk back in the time. I was working over these 8 years on the numbers of the different positions, slowly progressing, and Halo trained me a lot and gave me the skills, knowledge. I spent 2.5 years working in the Middle East, doing, also conducting the survey and helping with mechanical clearance and rubble removal in Libya. which is also has seen a lot of conflict and fighting back in the time. I spent a bit less than a year working in Sri Lanka, which has also the legacy of the old conflict, and the level of contamination there is quite huge. Not the same size which is currently in Ukraine, but the density of contamination is quite high, similar to Ukraine. So, nowadays, I'm working in Ukraine, for Ukraine, and which is makes me proud. It's a quite challenging job. However, it's quite honorable because you're realizing that you're helping your country. Which is make me proud.
What conclusions can you get from experience abroad in these countries? Do you think people in Ukraine or around the world understand the scope of the problem that Ukraine faces with the issue of mines?
So first of all, each country which has a mine contamination is unique. It's unique in terms of type of contamination, the nature of the conflict, the areas which is affected by contamination. So there is numerous aspects which need to be taken into account before try to compare the two different countries. So similar with some methods. In general they're similar, but if some clearance method or etc. work in one country, it doesn't mean that it's going to be working in because the source, the type of mines, type of threat, the type of the intensity of the war, etc., it's quite different from conflict to conflict. And again, duration also is quite essential because in some countries the conflict has been for a year or so. Some of them was a decade, etc. And again, when it was, because by the time some of the hazardous items become less operational, less dangerous. However, it still contains the danger.
So at the end of every interview, we ask our guests, what should we wish you personally? Of course, the end of the war and victory, but what else?
I reckon, you, in your question, you already have an answer. I wish, the first of all, the end of the war, which is, it's a dream for all Ukrainians.
Right.
It's something which is, united whole Ukraine, and, it makes every Ukrainian think absolutely the same.
All right. Thank you so much, Denis. Well, you have a lot of work to do. That's for sure.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Paldies Dīvam, kurš sarunājās ar Denisu Golovetsky, Halo Trust Ukrainas nodaļas operāciju vadītāju. Jā, skaidrs, ka darba būs vēl daudz, un runājot jau ne tikai par mīnām, arī par dažādiem citiem nesprāgušiem priekšmetiem, jau vēl pēc kara beigām, nav jau noslēpums, ka arī pēc otrā pasaules kara beigām mēs joprojām kaut kur atrodam pa kādam nesprāgušam lādiņam, kas, diemžēl, dažos gadījumos pat beidzas letāli, jo kāds no to atradējiem vēlas pats pārbaudīt, kas tad lācītim vēderā. To gan nevajadzētu darīt.
Tur tās divas trakās lietas. Viens ir tas, ka tiešām civiliedzīvotāji ir tie, kuri visvairāk cieš. It sevišķi, ja mēs runājam par bērniem, vai ne, kuri dzīvo kaut kādos lauku teritorijās, ieskrien mežā vai laukā, vai vēl kaut ko redz, kaut kas tur mētājas, jo tagad tās mīnas jau nav tikai tādas acīm redzamas, ir tādas, kas izskatās, pēc mazliet plasmas gabaliem atliek paņemt rokās, un tev rokas vairāk nav. Otra trakākā lieta ir tāda, ka šajās te piefrontes zonās šīs ir mīnas, kuras tiek vienkārši izšautas, un tad viņas tiek izkaisītas pa lielu, plašu teritoriju, un bez šādām te atmīnēšanas operācijām, kur tiešām tiek pa centimetram pārbaudīta zeme, nav iespējams būt pilnībā drošiem. Līdz ar to tu vari dzīvot laukos, bet nekur nevar paspērt pa labi, pa kreisi soli, jo tāpēc, ka vienkārši nezinu, vai tevi tur nesagaida nāves draudi vai trauma uz mūžu. Tik tālu par atmīnēšanas operāciju Ukrainā, kas vēl būs aktuāla gadiem, diemžēl. Ja jums šī saruna šķita interesanta, aizsūtiet saiti ar to saviem draugiem, radiem paziņām, vai arī rakstiet mums, ko jūs domājat par dzirdēto. Drošinātājs @Latvijas Radio LV ir mūsu e-pasta adrese, un tagad pirms ieraksta ielūkojos, apskatījos, mums ienākušas vairākas jūs vēstules, un tad, lai nebūtu sajūta, ka mēs tās ignorējam, es tad gribēju nedaudz nocitēt. Piemēram, Ingus Kuplais mums ir atrakstījis, ka viņu ir sajūsminājis Kristīnas Bērziņas pagājušajā epizodē teiktie vārdi, pašās pēdējās viņas runas sekundēs, kurās Kristīna saka, ka uzvarēs nevis armijas un spēks, bet cilvēki un cilvēcība. Ingus aicina noklausīties vēlreiz pašiem Kristīnas teikto, un es, protams, varu tikai pievienoties Ingum. Savukārt Mārtiņš Biezais ir atrakstījis mums arī vēstuli, sakot, un patiesībā paceļot tādu ļoti svarīgu jautājumu. Viņš ir klausījies vairākas desmitas mūsu epizožu. Paldies, liels Mārtiņ, par to. Un Mārtiņam arī ir radies viedoklis, ka drošinātājs pauž caur šīm te intervijām un caur mūsu saturu, pauž visnotaļ heroisku un samērā homogēnu viedokli par procesiem karā Ukrainā, kā arī par sagaidāmo un vēlamo kara iznākumu. Raksta Mārtiņš, manuprāt, paužot tikai vienpusēju skatījumu uz jautājumu, mēs radām risku nesagaidīt to iznākumu, uz kuru esam tik ļoti fokusējušies. Šāda vilšanās var būt nevien psiholoģiski grūta, bet arī iespējams radīt labvēlīgu augsni vietējo alternatīvo viedokļu paudēju vēlākajām gavilēm. Man jāsaka, es pilnīgi piekrītu Mārtiņam par to, ka ir jābūt ļoti uzmanīgiem ar to, kā mēs runājam. Protams, ka visādi citādi, piemēram, ir reizes, kad mēs intervijas beidzam ar tekstu Slava Ukrainai, un tad man pašam ir bijušas pārdomas par to, vai profesionāls žurnālists var šādi te nostāties kaut kādā pusē, un šajā gadījumā ir šis te izņēmums, kad man ir pilnīgi skaidrs, kā pusē es esmu, es neslēpju to, bet te nav tikai stāsts par Ukrainu pret Krieviju. Es domāju, tie, kuri mūs klausās, visi vairāk vai mazāk ir homogēni šajā ziņā. Bet tas jautājums, par ko runā tieši Mārtiņš, ir, vai mēs varbūt pārāk maz runājam par kaut kādām ēnas pusēm. Un šis jautājums man arī ir kādu laiku bijis. Man pakausīja, par ko es esmu domājis, jo skaidrs, ka ne jau visi Ukrainā ir varoņi, par to mēs esam runājuši, man liekas, pirms nedēļām 3, 4, kad mēs runājām par cilvēkiem Ukrainā, kuri izvairās no dienēšanas armijā. Es kādu laiku veltīju mēģinājumiem atrast kādu cilvēku, kurš būtu gatavs runāt par šo tēmu mūsu lielās intervijas formātā. Diemžēl man tas nav izdevies, ja jūs zinat kādu Ukrainas pilsoni, kurš izvairās no dienesta un viņam ir ļoti skaidri pamatojums, sapratni par to, kādēļ to viņš dara, tad atsūtiet mums kontaktus, sazināsimies, parunāsim par to. Un ir daudz vēl tēmu, kuras raisa jautājums. Bet, godīgi sakot, ir tā, ka kara laikā mēs arī droši vien kaut kā sevi cenzējam, ka no vienas puses negribās runāt par kaut kādām lielām problēmām, tādējādi neradot augsni Ukrainas nelabvēliem. No otras puses, ja mēs runājam tikai par labo, tad mēs paši kaut kādā veidā safabricējam realitāti, vai arī paši sevi uzkurinam uz to, ka Ukraina tulīt vinnēs un Ukraina atgūs visas teritorijas un tas prasīs 2-3 nedēļas. Mums ir bijuši šī pieredze, vai arī, piemēram, kad atceries, Rihard, tad, kad bija runa par Abrams tankiem, ka lūk, amerikāņi iedos Abrams tankus un tad gan kara laukā Ukraina demolēs Krievus un tulīt visu atgūs. Nenotika tā. Tās mums ir mūsu pašu mācības, kuras ir gūtas kara laikā. Nav tādu brīnumieroču, ir negatīvās lietas Ukrainas pusē arī, bet mēs mēģinām atrast to balansu starp pozitīvajām lietām un ļoti uzmanīgi skatāmies, kā runāt par negatīvajām. Viena no tēmām, par kuru es jau kādu gadu, vai pat ilgāk, sev esmu rakstījis blociņā, manā folderītī atsevišķa sadaļa par korupciju Ukrainā. Tā ir tēma, no kuras nevar izbēgt runājot par Ukrainu. Mēs zinām, pirms kara tā bija viena no korumpētākajām valstīm reģionā, turpat apmēram, kur Krievija, bet kara gaitā, kad tu runā ar cilvēkiem, un atkal jau šis ir vai tā ir realitāte, vai tā ir mana tikai iedomātā vēlme, cerēt, ka pēc šāda te nežēlīga kara ar tik nežēlīgiem iznākumiem, kad mirst drosmīgākie Ukrainas ļaudis, vai te nav stāsts tikai par to, ka mēs tagad atbrīvosim Ukrainu, proti Ukraiņu paši, ja? Ka viņi atbrīvos savu valsti, kam viņi to dara, kam viņiem ir vajadzīga savu valsts? Lai tā būtu otra Krievija? Nu, droši vien, ka nē. Un varbūt šis mans ir tāds wishful thinking, kā saka, ka pēc kara Ukrainai ir jābūt citādai valstī, nekā tā bija pirms tam, un ja Krievija ir viņu pretstats, tad viņi gribētu būt maksimāli pretēji tam, kas ir Krievija šobrīd. Un tas skar arī korupciju. Un ņemot vērā arī drošinātāju formātu, kad mēs mēģinam runāt par personīgiem stāstiem, un šis ir slikts brīdis, kad par to runāt, jo tāpēc, ka šajā nedēļā intervija bija vairāk tomēr par tēmu kopumā, un tas nav tas mūsu jājam zirdziņš. Bet šis bija tas gadījums, kad Denis tuvi radinieki vēl aizvien ir okupētajās teritorijās, un viņš ļoti nevēlējās runāt tieši par personīgajām lietām, lai nekaitētu kaut kā saviem radiniekiem, tāpēc arī mums bildi ir atsūtīta tikai viena viņa un no sāniem, tā ka viņa seja nav saskatām. Tas pats arī attiecas uz viņa kaut kādiem publiski pieejamām informācijām Halo lapā un tam līdzīgi. Tad, nu jā, un mēs parasti meklējam šos personīgos stāstus, bet ir izņēmumi. Un izņēmums būs arī nākamajā nedēļā, jo, ja es visu laiku gaidīju, kad personīgi stāstu par korupciju Ukrainā, bet nu ar ko runāt, ar kādu korumpantu vai ar korupcijas apkarotāju vai ko, nu redz, un dažreiz ir tā, ka domā un nekas nenotiek šajā ziņā, bet tad Rihards teica, ka viņš brauc uz Igauniju, uz Tallinu, uz kādu konferenci, un tur būšot arī viena liela speciāliste par korupcijas jautājumiem Ukrainā. Te es piesaku jau nākamās nedēļas mūsu viesi, bet par to tuč, neatklājot visas kārtas, Rihard, tu varētu pastāstīt.
Jā, nu vēl tik piebilstot, informatīvajā telpā mēs redzam brīžiem optimistiskāku, brīžiem pesimistiskāku informāciju un atspoguļojumu tam, kas notiek Ukrainā. Vairāk varbūt esam pieraduši to negatīvismu redzēt tieši par notikumiem vai par situāciju frontē, bet nav jau tā, ka Ukrainā pašā iekšpolitiski nebūtu, protams, dažādu problēmu, un viena no tām lielajām problēmām ir korupcija, kas ir bijusi jau diezgan ievērojama, pielīdzinām arī Krievijas līmenim jau pirms kara, un jā, laika gaitā situācija ir uzlabojusies, bet vēl ir ļoti daudz darāmā. Tev tiesa, es biju Igaunijā, biju Tallinā, Lennarta Merija konferencē, kas ir veltīta drošības jautājumiem, un tur es arī sastapu pārstāvi no nevalstiskās organizācijas pretkorupcijas rīcības centrs, Olenu Halušku, parunājos ar viņu par to, kā tad Ukrainai ir gājis visus šos gadus, cik liela korupcija bija pirms tam, cik liela tā ir tagad, kādās jomās tā ir, ko tad viņa dara arī savā nevalstiskajā organizācijā, lai mēģinātu šo situāciju mainīt, kas ir tās sviras, ar ko to ir iespējams darīt, cik vispār grūti to šobrīd ir darīt, proti veikt reformas arī kara laikā, un galu galā, kāpēc, jā, tu jau minēji, kāpēc tas vispār ir nepieciešams, kādā Ukrainā Ukraiņi tad vēlas dzīvot nākotnē, un kāpēc ir nepieciešams tomēr šo korupciju izskaust.
Tas pēc nedēļas. Laipni aicināti klausīties, ja jūs mūs klausāties ar kādu laika nobīdi, tad vienkārši spiežat uz next podziņas, nākamo mūsu epizodu klausieties, ja nē, tad jāpagaida nedēļa. Un liels paldies Mārtiņam Biezajam par vēstuli, un ļoti, man liekas, loģisks un pamatots viedoklis, un droši rakstiet mums to, ko jūs domājat, tas arī mums palīdz būt formā un kaut kā neaizplūst, nezinu, kur varbūt nevajadzētu aizplūst. Jā, sadarbojamies, un ja jūs drošinātājs saturs interesē, tad mums ir tikai prieks, un ja jūs iesaistāties tā satura veidošanā, tā vai citādi, ar saviem padomiem un komentāriem un kritiku, tad man ir tikai lielāka pārliecība, ka mēs varam piedāvāt to, kas tiešām ir tā vērts, lai klausītos. Nu ko, tas šai reizei arī viss. Šonedēļ bija runa par atmīnēšanas mega darbu Ukrainā, nākamnedēļ runāsim par korupciju, pēc tam jau mums ir vēl dažas epizodes priekšā. Jāņu nedēļā ir gaidām šīs sezonas pēdējā epizode, tad mēs uz kādu brītiņu no jums atvadīsimies. Bet šobrīd mēs atvadamies tikai līdz nākamajai nedēļai. Paldies, ka klausījāties, paldies, ka bijāt kopā ar mums un atcerieties. Jauna epizode katru ceturtdienu un drošinātājs, tas ir skaidri un personīgi par karu Ukrainā. Raidieraksts Drošinātājs.